Well met, everyone. I am Rich Delich, and today I am going to be talking to you a little bit about being a dungeon master, giving you my tips, my tricks, my advice, and my suggestions from an old school, veteran, longtime dungeon master to all of you new dungeon masters out there. Now, you may not be new to the game of Dungeons and Dragons. You may have been playing for the better part of 3 decades, but perhaps in recent times, you've had to take the role behind the screen, on the other side of things as a dungeon master, and you're relatively new to this. Maybe you haven't been a dungeon master yet, but with the upcoming release of Eberron or the recent release of Baldur's Gate Descent into Avernus, you'll be donning the hat of the dungeon master in an upcoming game or campaign pretty soon. Maybe you are a dungeon master, but you've only been one for a year or so. Maybe you just started when 5th edition came out. First, let me offer you just a little bit of background and a very simple statement. These are, of course, my thoughts. It's not the right way, it's not the only way, it's not even the best way. It's just my way. But I think through offering sort of those experiences and having to deal with different game types, different editions, different groups, different players, and just growing and maturing, not just as a person, but as a dungeon master, I've learned a few things that may help make your journey a little more tolerable and just hopefully a lot more fun so that you can keep doing this. I started playing Dungeons & Dragons in the very early 80s. Now, I didn't really know what it meant to be a dungeon master. There was just always one person among my family, so my cousins and whatnot, that got me into the game. That always had to kind of be the storyteller, and that was the dungeon master, and the other person ran their characters through whatever I was coming up with. But I oftentimes would play sort of an NPC. So we kind of always had like multiple players. I just sort of handled the final say on certain rules and details. I didn't know I was a dungeon master, as I said, because I was also like 11 years old. So that was the first time. So this is something like 30-something years ago. I really dabbled into being a dungeon master when 3rd edition came out, which is looking at about 20 years by now. I jumped into a Forgotten Realms campaign, and I ran that for my players, and we started at level 1, and they got all the way up to almost epic level handbook, I think. So we're talking 18 to 20-ish in that range. So that was a really long, and that was something where we played a good, I'd say 40 hours a month. So once a week, 10 to 12-hour sessions. It was a lot. It was pretty intense. And this was in Forgotten Realms, but the storyline and all of that stuff, I didn't run any pre-published modules or books. It was all of my ideas. And that has gone on since. I've run Calamar. I've run Scarred Lands. I've run many other games outside of D&D as well. I've run Slay, I've run Unknown Armies, I've run Godlike, I've run Vampire, I've run Warhammer Fantasy, I've run Warhammer 40k, I've done the Death Watch. I think you get it. I've played a lot. 7th Sea, Fading Suns, Arcanus, a lot of stuff. And obviously, as you know, if you watch any of my videos, I'm really into the Dungeon Master thing in 5th edition D&D. I did it through 3.0, as I said, 3.5, 4th edition, 5th edition, and so on. I don't plan to ever leave that side of the screen. I just enjoy being a Dungeon Master more than anything else. And in your gaming group, there's always has to be one person that's willing to volunteer to take up that role, right? So I hope to just offer you, I'm going to give you 5 tips that might just be some things you can think about to help you in your journey. The first one, and these are in no order of importance. Being a dungeon master is more about people management and cat herding than it is storytelling and rule adjudication. Yes, the latter two are important. You want to be a good storyteller, you want to be a good entertainer, and you want to be able to hash through the rules, and I'll mention that in a later point as well, and be able to come up with a final determining factor or say. But you have to manage people and you have to be a cat herder. What do I mean by that? I'm fortunate in that I've had the kind of that group that played in the 3.0 Forgotten Realms campaign with me. Those people are still lifelong friends. They're like brothers to me. So I'm very familiar with my table. And yes, I run 9 to 10 players, and I have since 5th edition came out, so 5+ years. But among that group is my son, my wife. So these are people that I obviously know quite well. So the level of people management and cat herding versus focusing on storytelling and rule adjudication is of course going to depend on who makes up the group at your table. If you're just learning and wrangling in these personalities, or especially if you have a few that you maybe know very well, but then a new person gets thrown into the mix, you don't know how they're going to mesh with the people at your table. Whereas in my case, we're all friends and family that have known each other for a very long time. Adam and Sarah, 2 players in my group, notwithstanding, I've only known them since we started 5th edition, which is about 5 years, but they're like, they come to my home. They're family to me. Their kid hangs out in my living room while we play. So they are family to me, but also just how they are as people, they mesh in very well with the group that I've had for 20 plus years. So you have to kind of learn to know your people. And if you don't, some tips and tricks that I can suggest with is really focus on kind of reading the gestures and the postures of certain people. And what I mean by it being more important to focus on people management and cat herding than it is storytelling is no matter how good your story is, if people aren't listening to it, storytelling needs to take a backseat to the fact that that person is on their cell phone. Clearly, they're not engaged. You have to try and learn to understand what it is that engages them in the game. What are they looking for? Perhaps even have that conversation in what I call session 0, where you tell people, hey, we're going to meet up and we're going to make some characters. We're going to talk about this new world I'd like to run. Hey, there's a new game. I volunteer to be the dungeon master. Let's have some conversation about it. Simply ask them, and you'll see some other points tie into this. The next one, as a matter of fact. Communicate. Talk with the group and ask them, what are they looking for in the game? What style of game do they want? And ask them individually, what makes you happy and excited about a D&D game? If they've been a veteran DM themselves and they want to take the role as a player and you're new to DMing, ask them what are the sort of things that they like, they don't like, and whatnot. Okay? So don't be afraid to just simply communicate. And that's a really smooth transition into the next one. Communication is everything. I said that this list was not in order. If there was any that is probably going to be number 1, it would be communication. But notice how communication is something that stands for all aspects of life. Most issues, okay, if we were to look at dungeon mastering versus the DM-player relationship, all is well when the stories are flowing and it feels like it's Matt Mercer in Critical Role and you have theater actors and voice actors and it's just smooth. It sounds good. It's elegant. People want to watch it. You can film it. You want to make animated series out of it, so on and so forth. But it's the problems, right? It's the hiccups. It's the, I've got a player that sucks. I've got a DM that is a dick. I've got an issue with my row, whatever it may be. The game is falling flat. The pacing is off versus what. It's the problems that people post on forums and Reddit and all this other stuff. In life and anything else, what is the number one way, usually, to at least get to the bottom of the problem is communication. Whether it's a lack of communication or it's just something that needed to be said, the same can go for a relationship, right? And that's really the way you need to think about it. You are having a relationship with the players at your table. Communicate as you would in a good relationship. Ask the players. Ask them at the beginning of a session, what is it that they, or in the session 0, as I said, ask them what sort of style and game do they want? Because that can often dictate. Too many times I've seen people, a DM trying to run the wrong game. Or because they're enamored and excited about Curse of Strahd, and you'll see this tie into the last point about it being about them. The DM's excited about Curse of Strahd, but for that group, that gothic feel, it just doesn't resonate well. If it's supposed to be something really gritty and dirty and combat and very violent, but you have people at your table that just don't like that, whether it's some taboo subjects or otherwise, it's not the right fit. Maybe D&D is not the right fit for you. I have played, I don't want to say an equal amount of time, but I've invested a great deal of time into just role-playing, not Dungeons and Dragons. I know that's all the hype lately. I know that's all the hype lately and all the rage, but if you can just sit at a table and enjoy a good night of gameplay, play whatever game is going to fit best for the group. Now, once you've started the game, in communication, ask everyone, all your players, if they enjoyed the session. What did they like? Ask what can be improved. Either you, personally, take the criticism, take the critiques. Ask which pillar of gameplay is most appealing to them. That's something you can often do during session 0 or when you have that initial meeting where it's like, hey, I'm thinking of running this campaign. What do you think? Well, what is it like? What's this world like? Well, Avernus, it's probably going to be, you're going to go in hell, and there's probably going to be a lot of fighting. If they want a lot of intrigue and deception and social stuff and, that sort of atmosphere and vibe, and they don't mind, of course, everyone loves doing some combat, But if you're not invested into Dwarven Forge and crafting and foam stuff and terrain and putting miniatures and all these fiddly bits, and you're a little more theater of mind, or you just use a whiteboard and put an X and a circle and here's where the bad guy is, maybe you need to run Ravnica instead of Avernus, because maybe you can go into the dynamics and the political aspect of all the guilds. Just that simple change might make your game really shine. You know, not every group and player and DM is a fit for every single thing. You know, don't be a slave to what the designers and the writers made if it's not a fit for your vibe and your theme. And a good way to think about that is think outside the game. As I said, maybe you're not going to play D&D, but another way is get a general sense of what everyone's favorite movies are. What are the books they read? That's going to tell you a lot. That's why I'm so successful with my group, because yes, we've known each other, but we've also, for 25 years, we've gone to the movies and we've watched all the Star Wars and Lord of the Rings. We generally like all the same video games and the same things. So that brings a sense of strength to the group already. Asking them which pillar of gameplay is really important before you start your sessions. Number 3, delegate when necessary. And what I mean by that is if there's a rule issue or something you need to come up with, something you don't know, don't get to your phone. If you don't like when your players are on your phone, stop being on your phone. Now, maybe you're using a tablet, an iPad, a laptop, a way to kind of look through your rule set on D&D Beyond, and that's the interface you use, that's fine. You know, and yes, phones have become the new note-taking. I still try and like to have a Post-it note or rip off a piece of paper and hand it. That's how it was in old days. That's the one benefit of being an old DM is I was a dungeon master before an internet existed, right? I was a dungeon master during the Stranger Things time. So be able to delegate and get off your phone. Don't bog down from your perspective. Oftentimes, you're not so much waiting on players. The players are waiting on you to come up with some sort of a resolution or an outcome and present them with more story and more interaction. So delegate. Hey, I don't know what the rule is on that. I'm going to rule it as this right now. If I get it wrong, I'm not necessarily going to change it because there may be some things that are snowballing at this point, but I'll get it right next time, and I apologize. But this is how I'm going to rule it for now. But hey, can you look it up for me? Find a player that's really engaged, or maybe one of those veteran players or a player that's been a DM. He gets it. They know. Ask them to look it up. Maybe it's the rules lawyer at the table, okay? But delegate, and most importantly, learn to move on, which ties into that, of course, of I want to just move the story forward. You handle the rule. You look it up for me and let me know, and we'll get it right next time. But also just learn to move on if there's some hiccups at the game, if there's, an issue between player and player, between player and DM. Learn to don't bog the session down with a bunch of trivial shit. Always remember that you are there to have some food, have some drink, and be among people, real-life players sitting at a table having a good time. If you all come together and you're hanging out and you're supposed to watch a good movie, and in the first 20 minutes, everyone at the table thinks the movie sucks, you should be able to just pause that movie or stop it and say, guys, let's do something else. This sucks. The same goes for a DM session or a D&D session. I understand you've spent a lot of time and energy into planning for this and everyone's hyped and excited about it, but that's also kind of a constant check and balance system with the first points that I've mentioned of learning to move on, in that constantly keep asking, is this working out or not? Did we pick the wrong game? Sometimes you won't know that until you're knee deep into it, right? So you have to kind of know when to move on, but most importantly, move on. And I'm going to do the same right now. Point 4, know when to take a breather. Either an in-game break or a break from the game, or as the DM entirely. That's really important. That's huge for pacing. Okay, energy only lasts so long. Maybe you need coffee. Maybe you need another energy drink, whatever. Maybe you need to use the restroom. You can see people getting fidgety, maybe, and that's part of the communication and people management stuff, is just sort of, that's a good time to handle that cat herding aspect of juggling the people that are kind of checking out, or when it gets late into the night. But that's another conversation of communication of maybe you can start the game an hour earlier so that you can stop an hour earlier. Because once I pass 11 p.m., people start fading, right? It's just normal. We play on a Saturday, but some people work at 5 a.m. on Saturday morning. They're reaching that 19 hours awake point. As much as they want to be engaged, I mean, it's no different than you trying to plan your D&D sessions, and I make videos on 4 or 5 hours of sleep. I'm not as sharp as I otherwise could be. And that's going to start to lose that energy. When that happens to you as the DM, you're the fuel that feeds all the energy at the table. If your energy is bad, whether you don't feel well, you're sick, that's kind of one of those where know when to sort of take a break from just the session or something like that. Now, in-game breaks are very important, again, because they kind of can break up some tension that may be happening. They can kind of, if there's a lull moment and everyone is kind of checking out, they're on their phones, people are nodding off, you're having to ask them to repeat their things, or, what did you want to do? Hey, you're up. Hey, it's your turn. Initiative, you're up. And you can tell they're just not, okay, so what's happening again? They're not engaged in the combat. If you're going to be slow in real time at the table during initiative timing, why not just say, guys, let's take a 3-minute break real quick and just stop entirely and give people a chance to walk around, get some food, get a snack, whatever it may be. Okay, so learn to take a good in-game break. But also, the in-game break can build up a lot of tension. The villain gives his giant monologue, DM pause is what I call it, and says all this and that. And then, guys, let's take a break. I'm going to set up some terrain. That's a good opportunity for you to kind of get everything in order behind the screen and whatnot, and you take a break. So that's a good time. Maybe you change the music when a PC dies or falls, or get some massive curse, or something happens to an important NPC. Let's take a break. You give everyone a moment to kind of create that, look at it as scene breaks in the best movies. Okay, so learn to take a break. Also, it can go further. Like I said, if you don't feel well, you might just say, guys, we're going to get together and play board games just to keep the consistency of the group, but we're not going to play the game tonight. Or every 4 sessions, we're going to play a different game, like a one-shot adventure campaign, just to get a feel. That's a good way of getting the group to see what sort of you like. If you're just having a feeling out process of maybe Eberron or Ravnica is not the best, maybe Curse of Strahd or Out of the Abyss or one of the pre-published adventures is. But maybe you play this main campaign 3 times out of 4, in a month, once a week, but the last Saturday of every month, you always play that other campaign, or maybe an entirely different role-playing game. You're still keeping the group together, but you're also getting a good feel, and it's a good break. It gives the players a chance so that they're not being reckless with their current characters to maybe try out a new character. You know what I mean? That type of thing. So learn to take a break from the game. And sometimes it comes all the way down to you need to take a break as a DM. This is not working out for me. Maybe the prep time. I went to Baldur's Gate Avernus because I need some pre-published stuff that I can read and digest, because I just wasn't willing to invest the energy and time as much as I was before. There's still 15 hours a week, literally. But I was putting 25, 30 hours a week into planning my own world and story. So I told the players, I'm going to still be your DM, and we stopped Ravnica at like level 3 or 4. I need to have something that's already written for me. I need to invest a little less time. But it doesn't mean that the game has kind of faltered and diminished. Maybe I'm able to put more effort and energy into the actual session itself because I don't have as much prep work. So know when you need to change the game, or you be the DM now. I don't want to end the group. So can someone else volunteer to take, step up for a bit? Or maybe you just need to go on a 6-month hiatus and play board games instead. Okay? And the final one, this is a big one. Learn to let the group win. If they're being clever, let them be clever. If they're beating up your villains and your monsters, let them beat it. You're not going to run out. You have a monster manual of content. Let them win. And also, on that note, give each player an equal chance to win. And what I mean by that is give them equal time and effort. Don't make it significantly more difficult because maybe you don't like that guy as much. For that player to achieve their own personal character goals or player goals, yet you're kind of showing that nepotism or favoritism to your wife or those that you really care about or veteran role players. Okay? So give them an equal opportunity for their background to come about in the game. Give them an equal opportunity for their character to shine. And on that note, a big one is time. And whether it's a stopwatch or otherwise, professionally behind the scenes, or when I'm not a DM, I should say, I'm a personal trainer, fitness, strength and conditioning coach, so on and so forth. And I'm oftentimes in a group atmosphere training a bunch of people. And one thing that can happen is you get a new guy that comes in that doesn't know any of the moves. He has a lot of questions. I devote all of my attention to him. And the paying customers that kind of know what they're doing, they've been with me for 2 years, they kind of get neglected during that session. You can have that conversation with them ahead of time. Hey, I got some new people coming in. I'm going to pay attention to them, make sure they're safe and moving well. And they're like, dude, I got it. I'm not going anywhere. I'll be back tomorrow anyway. But as long as you let me know what I need to do, and I'll just be in the corner doing my own thing. But I still try and focus on almost a stopwatch concept where I'll keep track. And I want to make sure I give 10 minutes to that person and 10 minutes to that person. Give each person equal time, especially when you have veteran role players or people that tend to take over the game a lot, or it's inevitable. And that's where kind of knowing your people and wrangling in the people. Many players believe their character is the most important character at the table, and their goals are the goals that are the most important, and the rogue wants to do his city thieves guildy shit all the time, no matter what, even at the expense of the druid who never wants to go into the city. So find moments, plan them into your game and into your session. Just because they're a veteran role player and they're more comfortable with the spotlight on them, you need to give that same time. Give my wife and my son, for example, they're not nearly veteran role players. They don't even really like the game. They just play because it's important to me. That's my wife has told me that, and I'm great with that. I love it. I'm grateful for that. But I need to give her moments to shine because that's the only way she's going to become a better role player. But I know she's not going to be the team lead or the group lead, or she's never going to be the charismatic bard that wants to be the spokesperson for the party. She doesn't like, in a role-playing setting, making those decisions for the whole of the group. She feels like other people are better qualified, but I need to be careful of giving all the attention to those people and not to her, because then it makes her character feel a little less significant. And then it just doesn't help her build up that skill set. So give equal time to the players, and most importantly, let them win. It's about the players, it's not about you. Stop trying to win, stop trying to beat them up, stop trying to run the game that you only want to play in the way that you want to play. If you're outnumbered, man, woman, whoever it may be that's the DM, you're outnumbered. If you're having a good time but 5 people across from you are not, you're losing. Change it, make some changes. And that's, I think, the biggest thing that I've learned. And that's just come with age and maturity. It is not about you. Let the pride, let the ego go. If you're not Matt Mercer, don't try and pretend you are. If you don't have it, you don't have it. Run according to your strengths. Communicate and try and improve on your weaknesses. But let them shit on your content. And I think you will overall create just a better experience. And if you can't do that, you're not the right fit for that group. So I hope some of these 5 tips helped in some way, some capacity. It was just a nice breath of fresh air for me to kind of just ramble to you a little bit about some DM stuff, especially coming up with all the crunch lately and all the reviews and all the little fiddly bits, especially with a 300 plus page Eberron book coming up tomorrow. So there's a review coming up with that, as I said. But that's all I have for you folks today. Thanks everyone for watching, and take care.